The small courtroom in the quiet town of Willow Creek was heavy with tension. Angela Brooks, a single mother, stood at the center of it all, surrounded by judgment and prejudice. She had been accused of espionage, a baseless charge that threatened to strip away everything she had worked so hard to build. Her gaze wasn't just fixed on the jury. She was also braving the sharp stares of the onlookers seated behind her. How did an ordinary mother get caught in such a dangerous whirlwind? Was she truly guilty? Or was this part of a larger conspiracy? That's the story we're diving into today. Angela's story is more than just a courtroom drama. It's a symbol of the fight against injustice, prejudice, and corruption within the legal system. It's not just her battle. It's a powerful lesson about the strength of truth and the resilience of the human spirit. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you never miss out on any compelling content. If you find this story meaningful, please share it with your friends to spread the message of fairness and justice. Join me as we unravel the story of Angela Brooks and discover how she stood up to protect her dignity, her freedom, and what's right. Willow Creek was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else. Its cobblestone streets, lined with small shops and cozy cafes, painted a picture of simplicity and warmth. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface lay a community divided, grappling with unspoken biases and long-standing traditions. For Angela Brooks, this was home. She had lived here for over a decade, raising her daughter, Lily, while working tirelessly as a librarian. Her life was far from extravagant, but it was honest. Angela wasn't a stranger to hardship. She had lost her husband in an accident years ago, leaving her to navigate the challenges of single parenthood. But she took pride in her work and, most importantly, in raising Lily to be kind, curious, and resilient. Angela's life revolved around her daughter and the small, tight-knit community that was both a source of support and, occasionally, conflict. The trouble began subtly, as it often does. A misdirected glance, a hushed whisper, a sense of isolation at community events. Angela's outspoken nature and unwavering moral compass didn't sit well with everyone. She had earned a reputation for speaking up, whether it was about unequal treatment in schools or the lack of accessibility in public spaces. While some admired her courage, others saw her as a troublemaker. It was during the town's annual fundraiser that the storm truly began to brew. Angela had voiced concerns about a new policy proposed by the local council, a policy that disproportionately affected single-parent families. What started as a heated discussion quickly escalated into something far more sinister. A few days later, anonymous letters accusing Angela of illegal activities began circulating around town. The accusations were wild and unfounded: espionage, collusion, even theft. At first, Angela dismissed them as ridiculous rumors. But the situation escalated when she was served with a court summons. The charges were vague but serious enough to warrant a trial. The once friendly faces of her neighbors were now clouded with suspicion, and Angela found herself increasingly isolated. As the trial approached, the stakes became clearer. This wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about standing against a system that allowed fear and prejudice to dictate justice. Angela knew she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for Lily, for their future, and for anyone who had ever been silenced by injustice. The courtroom itself reflected the gravity of the situation. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for harsh sentencing, presided over the case. The prosecutor, ambitious and eager to win, painted Angela as a manipulative mastermind. And while Angela had a lawyer, their resources were limited compared to the well-funded opposition. The trial was more than a legal battle. It became a microcosm of the societal struggles Angela had faced for years. Each argument, each piece of evidence presented, highlighted not just the flaws in the case against her, but also the biases embedded within the community. Angela's story sets the stage for a deeper exploration of injustice, resilience, and the courage to fight against overwhelming odds. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's strength in standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Stay with us as we delve into Angela's journey, uncover the truth behind the accusations, and examine the lessons this story holds for us all. The accusations came like thunder on a clear day, abrupt, jarring, and impossible to ignore. Angela Brooks, a quiet yet determined single mother, found herself at the center of a scandal that seemed too surreal to be true. The letters, filled with unfounded accusations, weren't just rumors spread in hushed tones. They became the foundation for something far more dangerous, a formal legal case against her. At first, Angela dismissed the letters as the work of a disgruntled neighbor or someone with too much time on their hands. But when the court summons arrived, her world shifted. The charges were vague but alarming: fraud, misappropriation of funds, and even conspiracy. How had a librarian, someone who barely made ends meet, become the target of such outlandish allegations? Angela's initial reaction was disbelief. This has to be a mistake, she told herself, clutching the legal documents that detailed the charges. But as the days passed, the gravity of her situation became undeniable. The whispers around town grew louder. Friends who once greeted her warmly now avoided eye contact. Even the parents of Lily's classmates began to keep their distance. The case quickly captured the town's attention. Willow Creek had never seen anything like it. A single mother accused of crimes that seemed pulled from the pages of a spy novel. The local media latched onto the story, sensationalizing every detail. Headlines screamed, "Librarian or mastermind?" Shocking accusations rocked small town. The narrative was spun in ways Angela couldn't control, painting her as either a cunning villain or a tragic victim. As the trial date loomed, Angela prepared herself for battle. She knew she had to fight not just for her innocence, but for her daughter, Lily, whose life had been upended by the ordeal. Angela's lawyer, a kind but overworked public defender named Maria Ortiz, was sympathetic but realistic. "The evidence is weak," Maria assured her, "but public opinion isn't on our side. We'll need more than the truth to win this." The courtroom was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters lined the back rows, their pens poised to capture every moment. The judge, Harold Whitaker, was known for his no-nonsense demeanor and strict adherence to the law. The prosecutor, Gregory Mallard, was a rising star in the legal world, eager to make a name for himself with a high-profile conviction. Mallard wasted no time painting Angela as a calculating individual who had taken advantage of her position in the community. He presented shaky evidence, financial records that appeared altered, witness testimonies that relied on hearsay, and an anonymous tip that claimed Angela had funneled community funds into her own pocket. The case was riddled with inconsistencies, but Mallard's charisma and confidence made up for the lack of substance. Angela took the stand on the third day of the trial. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she recounted her life as a single mother, her dedication to her work, and her commitment to the community. "I have nothing to hide," she said, looking directly at the jury. "These accusations are not just lies. They're an attack on my character, my integrity, and everything I've worked for." Her testimony was powerful, but the damage had been done. Mallard's narrative had planted seeds of doubt in the minds of the jurors. The defense struggled to keep pace, their limited resources no match for the prosecutor's relentless approach. As the trial unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just about Angela. The case exposed the town's underlying biases and fears. Angela wasn't just fighting for her freedom. She was challenging a system that thrived on scapegoating the vulnerable. In a pivotal moment, Maria Ortiz presented a key piece of evidence, a series of emails that proved the financial discrepancies had been caused by a clerical error, not fraud. The revelation shifted the tone of the trial, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage caused by weeks of public scrutiny. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Each hour felt like an eternity for Angela, who waited anxiously at home with Lily. When the verdict was finally announced, the courtroom fell silent. "Not guilty." The words were a lifeline, pulling Angela back from the edge of despair. But the victory was bittersweet. Though she had been cleared of all charges, the scars of the ordeal remained. Angela knew her life in Willow Creek would never be the same. The trial was over, but the fight for justice wasn't. Angela's story had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of truth in the face of adversity. And while she had won this battle, the war against systemic bias and injustice continued. Stay tuned as we delve into the aftermath of the trial and the broader implications of Angela's fight for redemption. The trial may have ended with Angela's acquittal, but the story was far from over. In the days that followed the verdict, whispers of deeper corruption began to surface. The same system that had accused Angela of fraud now appeared to be hiding its own skeletons. And Angela, unwilling to let her ordeal be in vain, decided to uncover the truth. The first cracks in the facade came from an unlikely source, a clerk who had worked for the prosecution's office. She reached out to Angela's lawyer, Maria Ortiz, with an envelope marked confidential. Inside were documents that hinted at something far more sinister than clerical errors or mismanagement. Financial discrepancies linked to the town council, unusual approval of contracts, and the sudden disappearance of community funds pointed to a coordinated effort to cover up embezzlement. Angela's case, it turned out, had been a convenient smokescreen. By targeting a single mother with little power or influence, those truly responsible had hoped to deflect attention from their own crimes. It was a chilling realization. The very institutions designed to protect the community had weaponized their authority against an innocent individual. Angela's initial reaction was disbelief. She had always trusted the system, even as it had turned against her. But as Maria delved deeper into the documents, the evidence became undeniable. A series of emails between council members revealed discussions about framing Angela to buy time and shift public scrutiny. The prosecutor, Gregory Mallard, wasn't just ambitious, he had been complicit. "This isn't just corruption," Maria said one evening as she pored over the files. "This is a betrayal of everything the justice system stands for." Angela knew she couldn't stay silent. Despite the emotional toll of the trial, she felt a responsibility to expose the truth, not just for herself, but for her daughter, Lily, and the community she once believed in. But the decision wasn't without risk. Speaking out meant facing retaliation from powerful figures who had already shown they were willing to destroy her life to protect their own. With Maria's help, Angela began piecing together the web of corruption. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. The misappropriation of community funds wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger scheme involving inflated construction contracts, fraudulent grant applications, and kickbacks to council members. The revelations painted a damning picture of systemic abuse. One of the most shocking discoveries was a ledger documenting payments made to silence whistleblowers. It included names, teachers, librarians, even police officers who had been coerced into silence or forced out of their positions when they raised concerns. Angela's name was the latest addition to the list. Determined to bring the truth to light, Angela and Maria contacted a local journalist, Ethan Carter, known for his investigative reporting. Ethan, initially skeptical, quickly became convinced of the story's significance after reviewing the documents. "This isn't just about one person's innocence," he told Angela. "This is about exposing a system that's been preying on its own people." The investigation gained momentum as more individuals came forward. Former employees of the town council shared their stories, corroborating the evidence Angela and Maria had uncovered. Ethan's articles began appearing in the local paper, each one more explosive than the last. The headlines shifted from Angela's trial to the corruption scandal, a town betrayed, how Willow Creek's leaders exploited the system. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community. Protests erupted outside the town hall, with residents demanding resignations and a full investigation. Angela, once vilified, became a symbol of resilience and courage. The same neighbors who had shunned her during the trial now rallied around her, holding signs that read, "Justice for Angela and accountability for all." But the fight was far from over. The town council denied the allegations, calling them baseless and politically motivated. Gregory Mallard, who had spearheaded Angela's prosecution, went on the defensive, claiming he had acted in good faith based on the evidence presented to him. It was a familiar tactic: deny, deflect, and discredit. Angela's journey wasn't without setbacks. Her finances were still in shambles from the legal fees, and the emotional scars of the trial lingered. Lily struggled to adjust to life under the scrutiny of a community that had turned their lives into a spectacle. But Angela refused to back down. The tipping point came when the state attorney general announced an independent investigation into Willow Creek's governance. Subpoenas were issued, and arrests soon followed. Among those charged were two council members, a senior accountant, and, in a dramatic turn of events, Gregory Mallard himself. For Angela, the arrests were a bittersweet victory. She had exposed the corruption that had nearly destroyed her, but it came at a cost. "I didn't set out to be a hero," she said in an interview with Ethan. "I just wanted to clear my name. But if my story can help prevent this from happening to someone else, then it was worth it." The scandal reshaped Willow Creek, forcing the community to confront uncomfortable truths about power, accountability, and the systems they trusted. And while Angela's fight had started as a personal battle, it became a catalyst for change, inspiring others to stand up and speak out against injustice. In the next segment, we'll explore how Angela's resilience not only exposed corruption, but also sparked a movement for transparency and justice in small towns across the country. Stay tuned. The revelation of corruption had shaken the very foundation of Willow Creek. But Angela knew this was just the beginning. Exposing the truth was one thing. Ensuring lasting change was another. With the arrests of key council members and the prosecutor, the tide seemed to be turning in her favor. But Angela was acutely aware that systemic change would require more than headlines and protests. It would demand action, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Angela's first step was rebuilding her life. Her name had been cleared, and the community's sentiment toward her had shifted. But the scars of the trial and the subsequent fallout lingered. Angela began attending community meetings, not as an observer but as an active participant. "If we want change," she told a packed town hall, "we need to be part of it." Her words struck a chord. Many residents, inspired by her resilience, stepped forward to share their own grievances and ideas for reform. What had begun as a personal battle was quickly transforming into a grassroots movement. Angela, though initially reluctant to take on a leadership role, found herself at the forefront of the fight for transparency and accountability in local governance. One of the first initiatives was a petition demanding the resignation of any remaining council members implicated in the scandal. The petition gathered thousands of signatures within days, and Angela became the public face of the campaign. "We're not just asking for resignations," she clarified during an interview with Ethan Carter. "We're demanding a system that works for the people, not against them." As pressure mounted, the state-appointed interim council began holding public forums to address the community's concerns. Angela, armed with documents, testimonies, and a newfound sense of purpose, became a regular speaker at these forums. Her eloquence and determination won over skeptics and galvanized a divided community. But Angela's efforts didn't stop at local government. Recognizing the need for broader change, she collaborated with Maria Ortiz and other advocates to draft a proposal for statewide reforms. The proposal included measures for increased financial transparency, stricter oversight of public funds, and protections for whistleblowers. Angela's experience served as a case study, highlighting the devastating consequences of unchecked power. Meanwhile, the investigation into Willow Creek's corruption uncovered even more damning evidence: misuse of public funds, fraudulent contracts, and backdoor deals painted a picture of a system deeply entrenched in malpractice. The revelations prompted state lawmakers to take notice, and Angela was invited to testify before the State Senate Committee on Ethics and Governance. Standing before the committee, Angela recounted her ordeal with a calm yet passionate resolve. "I'm not here as a victim," she began. "I'm here as a mother, a community member, and a citizen who believes in justice. What happened to me should never happen to anyone else." Her testimony was met with a standing ovation, and several senators publicly committed to supporting reform legislation inspired by her story. Back in Willow Creek, Angela's fight was yielding tangible results. The new council implemented policies to ensure transparency in its operations, including public access to financial records and mandatory audits. Local schools and libraries, which had suffered from budget cuts, began receiving the funds they were due. For the first time in years, the community felt a sense of hope and empowerment. Yet, not everyone welcomed the changes. Some former officials, now facing criminal charges, launched smear campaigns against Angela, accusing her of seeking fame and fortune. Online trolls spread rumors, and anonymous threats became a regular occurrence. Angela, however, refused to be intimidated. "They tried to silence me before," she said in a public statement. "It didn't work then, and it won't work now." Her resilience inspired others to speak out. Teachers, nurses, and public workers who had long feared retaliation began sharing their own stories of corruption and abuse. Angela's movement was no longer confined to Willow Creek. It was spreading across the state, uniting people from all walks of life in the fight for justice. One of the most significant turning points came when Lily, Angela's daughter, wrote a heartfelt letter to the local newspaper. "My mom taught me what it means to be brave," she wrote. "Even when the world turned against her, she stood up for what was right. Now it's our turn to stand with her." The letter, published alongside a photo of Angela and Lily, became a symbol of the movement's heart and humanity. Angela's journey also caught the attention of national media, turning her into an unlikely hero. She used the platform to advocate for systemic change, emphasizing the need for ordinary citizens to hold those in power accountable. "This isn't just my story," she told a packed audience at a town hall meeting. "This is our story, and together, we can write a new chapter." By the end of the year, Angela's efforts had led to tangible reforms at both the local and state levels. The community of Willow Creek, once divided and disillusioned, had come together to reclaim its voice. Angela, though still recovering from the personal toll of her ordeal, found solace in the knowledge that her fight had made a difference. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Angela's legacy continues to inspire a new generation of advocates, proving that even in the darkest of times, one voice can spark a revolution. Stay tuned. As the days passed, Angela's team worked tirelessly to gather every piece of evidence that could bring the truth to light. They knew that exposing Judge Thompson's corruption was their only chance to save Angela from an unjust sentence. But the stakes had grown higher than they could have ever imagined. Every step they took seemed to attract more danger, with ominous threats shadowing their every move. One evening, Marcus and Lena, the investigative journalist who had been helping Angela, met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. Lena had just received a tip-off from an anonymous source. It was more than just an ordinary lead. It was a game-changer. According to the information, there were financial transactions linking Judge Thompson to organized crime. It wasn't just about manipulating court cases for personal gain. It was far more sinister than that. The documents Lena had received were clear. Judge Thompson had been taking bribes from criminal organizations, ensuring their illegal activities went unpunished in exchange for substantial payments. Angela's heart sank as she sifted through the evidence. This wasn't just a crooked judge. It was a man who had been influencing the legal system for his personal and financial gain, affecting countless innocent lives in the process. The evidence was irrefutable. The corrupt judge had been manipulating his position for years, using his power to shield criminals while sending innocent people to prison. The public needed to know the truth, but the question was, how could they get this information to the people? The stakes were too high to take risks. After much deliberation, the decision was made. Lena, with her reputation as a journalist, would be the one to bring the story to the world. But even as they worked to prepare the exposé, there were warnings and threats. Angela's phone buzzed with yet another anonymous message. "Stop now, or you'll regret it." The threats were becoming more direct, and the sense of danger was palpable. But there was no turning back. With the support of federal agents who were also invested in bringing Thompson down, Lena began compiling the evidence, preparing to publish it in a major news outlet. She knew the risks. If the story was picked up, it would send shockwaves through the entire legal system. And if Thompson's allies got wind of their plans, it could cost them everything. The night before the story was set to go live, Lena's heart raced as she uploaded the final pieces of the exposé to a secure server. Marcus, Angela, and Lena sat together, the weight of the moment heavy on their shoulders. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Lena hit the button that would make everything public. The next morning, the world awoke to a bombshell. The expose hit the news like a thunderclap. Headlines flashed across TV screens and newspapers. Corrupt judge exposed, prejudice, bribery, and abuse of power unveiled. The details were damning. The story described how Judge Thompson had abused his position for years, using his influence to shape verdicts in favor of criminals in exchange for kickbacks. The public outrage was immediate. Protesters flooded the streets, calling for Thompson's resignation and the immediate dismissal of those who had aided his corruption. Signs that read, "Justice for Angela" and "End Judicial Corruption" filled the air. People from all walks of life joined the cause, demanding accountability and reform within the judicial system. Angela, watching from the safety of her hideout, couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. The tide was turning. People were finally seeing the truth. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that justice might be within reach. But while the public's response was one of anger and outrage, the forces protecting Judge Thompson were not going to let him fall without a fight. Behind the scenes, those in power scrambled to contain the damage. Calls for investigations into Thompson's conduct were made, but some officials remained skeptical. "It's just a smear campaign," they said, dismissing the mounting evidence as political maneuvering. But public opinion was swaying fast. The pressure was too great to ignore, and even those who had previously supported Thompson began to distance themselves from him. In a dramatic turn of events, a whistleblower came forward from within the court system. This individual, a former clerk who had worked under Thompson, testified to his abusive practices, revealing even more of the judge's criminal connections. Their testimony was the final piece that proved Judge Thompson's guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. The legal community was rocked to its core, and the cries for justice grew even louder. The media frenzy around the case reached new heights. Television networks dedicated entire segments to covering the scandal, with special reports investigating judicial corruption. Interviews with experts and civil rights activists emphasized the systemic issues that allowed such corruption to thrive unchecked for so long. People were no longer just angry, they were demanding change. For Angela, it was a bittersweet victory. She had been a victim of this corrupt system for far too long. But the fight was not over. While the public's anger was on her side, there were still powerful forces working behind the scenes to protect Thompson and silence anyone who dared to speak out against him. Angela knew she had to stay vigilant. As the days turned into weeks, the outcry only grew louder. Marches, petitions, and even calls for nationwide judicial reform filled the news. The momentum was undeniable, and the fight for justice had only just begun. Angela stood stronger than ever, knowing that while the battle ahead would be fierce, the truth was finally on their side, and the public, fueled by a righteous outrage, would not rest until they saw true justice served. The courtroom was a tense battlefield. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if every breath taken in that room carried the weight of history. This was the moment Angela had been fighting for, an opportunity to face the man who had put her life in jeopardy, a chance to hold him accountable for the years of manipulation and deceit that had plagued the justice system. But the stakes were higher than ever. If they failed now, all the progress they had made, the courage of the people who stood by Angela, would be in vain. Angela stood with Marcus Lee by her side, feeling the weight of the entire ordeal pressing down on her shoulders. She had been through so much: threats, intimidation, betrayal, but none of that would matter if she couldn't see this through to the end. The moment had finally come. Judge Thompson would stand trial for his crimes. Despite the mounting public outrage and the overwhelming evidence against him, Thompson had been defiant. He had surrounded himself with high-powered legal defense attorneys, the best money could buy. He had remained steadfast in his belief that his connections, his position of power, would be enough to protect him. He was arrogant, convinced that no one could touch him, until now. The courtroom was packed, filled with reporters, activists, and citizens who had followed Angela's journey from the very beginning. Outside, the streets were lined with protesters, their voices a unified roar demanding justice. Angela could hear their chants even as she stood inside, waiting for the trial to begin. The people were with her. She had become the symbol of resistance against corruption. But she knew that the real battle would be fought within those four walls. As the proceedings began, Judge Thompson entered the room, flanked by his legal team. His expression was cold, confident, as he took his seat at the bench. His eyes scanned the room briefly, lingering on Angela, before turning to the prosecutor and defense. But his gaze betrayed a flicker of unease. He had no idea how deep the hole he had dug for himself had become. Marcus stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we are here today not just to bring one man to justice, but to send a message that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law." His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of years of suffering. He knew the gravity of what they were about to face, but he had also seen the evidence. He knew the truth. Angela's fight was now the fight of the people, the fight to reclaim their faith in a system that had failed them for so long. The prosecution's opening statement was strong, presenting the evidence of Thompson's corruption, bribes, manipulation of verdicts, and the abuse of power. The courtroom was on edge as the prosecutors laid out the damning details, painting a portrait of a man who had betrayed his oath for personal gain. The people in the gallery gasped at each revelation. For many, this was the first time they had heard of the full extent of Thompson's criminal activities. But then, the defense made its move. With a smirk, Thompson's attorney rose and began to counterattack. They tried to discredit the evidence, claiming that it was fabricated, that Angela and her supporters were engaging in a smear campaign. They even attempted to shift the blame onto the government, suggesting that the case was politically motivated. Thompson, sitting at the bench, appeared unfazed. His defense team, though, was playing a dangerous game, attempting to turn the tide by casting doubt on the integrity of the investigation. They tried to frame the evidence as circumstantial, questioning the credibility of the whistleblowers and journalists who had exposed the corruption. But the jury wasn't buying it. The tide began to shift as Marcus and Lena presented their most explosive piece of evidence yet, the video footage. In it, Thompson was caught on tape, directly interacting with members of a notorious criminal syndicate. The footage was clear. There was no mistaking what it showed. Thompson had been actively involved in the cover-up of criminal activities. It was the final nail in the coffin. The room fell into stunned silence as the video played on the large screen. The faces of the criminals and the judge's unmistakable presence on full display. Even Thompson's defense team was left speechless. For the first time, the man who had once been untouchable realized that he was cornered. The evidence was irrefutable. But despite the mounting evidence, Judge Thompson refused to show any sign of guilt. He sat there, stone-faced, as if he were still in control of the situation. It was as though he believed he could somehow still manipulate the outcome. His arrogance, once a shield, was now a glaring weakness. Angela, sitting quietly in the witness stand, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but resolute, cutting through the tension in the room. "I am not here for revenge," she said, addressing the judge directly. "I am here because I believe in justice. I believe that no one should be above the law. What you did to me, to so many others, was wrong. And today, I stand here to make sure that what happened to me never happens again." Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The courtroom was no longer just a place of legal proceedings. It had become a battleground for truth and justice. And in that moment, the scales began to tip decisively in Angela's favor. Outside, the protesters had grown louder, their chants echoing through the streets. Justice for Angela, justice for all. Their voices reverberated through the halls of the courthouse. They were no longer just bystanders. They were a force, pushing the momentum toward justice. The final confrontation was not just about Angela. It was about the entire system, about holding the corrupt accountable, and about ensuring that those who abused their power could no longer do so with impunity. As the trial drew to a close, the jury deliberated in silence. The tension was unbearable, but it was clear the tide had turned. The truth had been exposed. And now, it was time for Judge Thompson to face the consequences. The gavel fell, and silence swept through the courtroom like a storm's calm before the chaos. "Judge Thompson," once so confident in his invincibility, had been exposed for what he truly was, a man corrupted by power, willing to sacrifice his integrity for personal gain. The jury had spoken, and the verdict was clear, guilty on all counts. For Angela, the victory was bittersweet. She had fought for her freedom, for her dignity, and for the people who had suffered under the weight of a broken system. But as the courtroom emptied, she knew that this wasn't just about one judge or one case. It was about something much larger. For months, Angela had faced not only the legal system but a society that had turned a blind eye to corruption, a public that had grown accustomed to injustice. Today, however, the world had witnessed the power of resilience, the strength of truth, and the unwavering belief that change is possible, no matter the odds. The courtroom, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had become a symbol of what could be achieved when the fight for justice is led by those willing to stand up for what is right. The victory over Judge Thompson was not the end of the journey. It was, in many ways, just the beginning of a larger movement. People who had once been passive witnesses were now empowered. Angela's story was a catalyst, igniting a fire in those who had long been silenced by fear or indifference. This case was proof that corruption can be dismantled, that no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond the reach of accountability. But even as the public celebrated Angela's triumph, she knew that this victory alone would not be enough. The systems that allowed corruption to flourish were still in place, the institutions still rife with inequality and exploitation. Angela had exposed one man's wrongdoing, but there were many more, many systems, and many structures that needed to be confronted. As the cameras flashed and reporters clamored for interviews, Angela took a moment to reflect on what this battle had taught her. She had learned that change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to fix the problem. It comes from stepping forward, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. It comes from finding allies in unexpected places and building a movement that can't be ignored. Angela's fight was not just her own. It was the fight of everyone who had ever been wronged, everyone who had ever been overlooked or denied justice. It was a fight for the people who had no voice and for those whose voices had been silenced by the powerful. It was a reminder that, when we come together, we can hold the powerful accountable, no matter how deep the corruption runs or how high the stakes. And now, as the world watched Angela's victory, it was time for action. The fight didn't stop with the conviction of Judge Thompson. It was time to dismantle the systems that enabled corruption to thrive, to demand transparency, fairness, and justice for all. So, what can we do? How can we ensure that the victory we've witnessed today isn't just a fleeting moment, but a lasting change? 1. Demand accountability in every corner of society. Angela's case is a clear reminder that we must demand transparency at all levels of power, whether in the courtroom, in government offices, or in corporate boardrooms. Accountability is the cornerstone of a just society. We cannot afford to let corruption fester. We must hold our leaders accountable, whether through voting, peaceful protests, or supporting organizations that fight for justice. 2. Speak up for what is right. Each of us has the power to challenge injustice, whether in our own communities or on a larger scale. The system relies on silence, on people turning a blind eye to wrongdoing. But when we speak up, we become a force for change. Angela didn't wait for someone else to step in. She used her voice to expose the truth. We all have the ability to do the same. 3. Support organizations that fight for justice. There are countless organizations that work tirelessly to expose corruption, advocate for the voiceless, and protect the innocent. Support them, whether by donating, volunteering, or simply spreading the word. These organizations are the lifeblood of movements for change, and your support can make all the difference. 4. Stay informed and educated. A society that understands its rights and holds itself accountable is a society that thrives. By staying informed, we arm ourselves with the knowledge to fight for a better world. Angela's victory wasn't just about the courtroom. It was about the power of information, of education, and of understanding the systems that govern our lives. 5. Spread the message. Angela's story has reached millions, but the work is far from over. Share this story. Talk about it with others. and remind the world that justice is not a privilege, it is a right. By continuing to amplify these voices, we ensure that future generations inherit a world that values fairness, integrity, and equality. Angela's victory is a call to arms. It's a reminder that we are not powerless in the face of corruption. Each of us, in our own way, can make a difference. Together, we can hold those in power accountable, ensuring that no one is above the law and that justice is always within reach. So, what will you do? Will you be the one to stand up and speak out against injustice? Will you be the one to make a difference in your community, in your society, in the world? This is more than just Angela's story. It's our story. It's a story about all of us. And together, we can create a future where justice prevails. Call to action. If Angela's story has inspired you, if you believe in the power of justice and truth, I encourage you to take action today. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to stay informed about the ongoing fight for accountability and change. Let's continue to build this movement together. Because when we unite, we can make the world a better place for everyone.